you. Okay. Rightio, well, let's get started. And this is a bit of a test, trying to do the live stream and do it live as well. So it's actually worked out well because we've got a lot of people that couldn't make it in or saved them a long trip in. So they've joined us via Zoom. So thank you for that. And for everyone that's come in and had some food and some alcohol, that's been good for you as well. Make sure you keep recharging as we go along. So we'll get started with it all. I'm hoping that this works. Okay, so just a disclaimer to say that the presentation is not advice, it's just information based on everything that we know from the budget. And we'll obviously, for those that are clients, will deal with their individual circumstances when we need to. So just for those that don't know me, I'm Dean Hutchins. I'm the owner of Diversified and I run the business. Just in terms of submitting questions throughout. So those of you that are here, obviously just put your hand up if you've got a question and we'll ask. We'll happily get you to ask them. And for those of you on Zoom, just put it through the Q&A box and I'll get to them whenever I can. I'll keep an eye on it, but it's a bit hard to sort of monitor every single thing at the same time. Okay. So just analysis. So I know it's a couple of nights and since the budget's been on, and also that the media's had a fair bit of say in what's happened. So I'll just sort of put my cap on it without that sort of media influence and try to be as non-biased as I possibly can. So it's very similar to last year. There's certainly a pre-election spend up in there. And I think the government was sort of almost damned if they did and damned if they didn't. But if they spent too much, then it would be too obvious. And if they didn't spend enough, they mightn't have had any chance of trying to secure a victory. So I think when we look at it on balance, they probably spent the right amount, but that'll be really blown up that they've spent too much. So with the spending up, that is really reflective of another Labor style budget. And what they've done, again, put a lot of money into areas that maybe marginal seats or even some of the Labor strongholds, things like they've given a fair bit of incentive for apprentices to take up an apprenticeship. So that's typically something that Labor would focus on. So that money's going there to try to win the votes over there as well. I did say this last year, it's a huge spend. So if I go back, I reckon 4 or 5 years ago, you'd hear the government talking about, we're going to allocate 5 billion here or 10 billion here, million, or 10 million here. But now we're talking 10 billion here or 2 billion here. It just rolls off the tongue so quickly, and the significance of this money is really what's been clocking up the debt and the deficit that we've got. But there is stimulus in there again, which has been really good because that's encouraging taxpayer spending, and we really need that spending just to keep the economy ticking. But I'll come back to how that can affect inflation just a little bit later. Okay, so just in terms of spending, they're putting money into similar areas to last year, so infrastructure, into jobs, into innovation, into things like healthcare. I didn't put a Navy battleship up there or something like that, but there's a lot going towards defence. And for the second budget in a row now, we've actually seen a women's budget in addition to the normal budget, which is addressing things such as family violence and protecting women and just the other issues that are more topical. And I think that's actually a good thing because quite often the budget's been very, I suppose, more masculine focused. So it's good to see that that's actually been something that they've done for the last couple of years. So the whole idea, though, is if we spend, that means businesses make money. That means that they then employ new staff, and it also means that they go and buy new equipment, and that equipment that comes from another employer somewhere that's employing new staff and buying his own equipment or her own equipment. So it sort of helps keep everything ticking along. And when I looked at the budget, I went back a couple of years. In the 2020 budget, there was an incredible number of tax savings that were put in. And the whole idea there is if we spend money, businesses will employ more and our economy will rebound. And the manufacturing and infrastructure does result in more jobs. If I look back on where we were back in 2020 and where we are now, it did work. So it's worked very successfully. And so since it's worked, they've decided to give it another go. So a lot of the previous tax incentives that we've already been given, they've been extended, which is great. Taxpayers, again, as I just mentioned before, those that spend their money, businesses then employ more staff, and those staff then go and pay more tax. And that then helps the revenue to the Australian government to help pay for all of the bits and pieces that we need to. Specifically, our big issue is their level of debt. So it results in lower unemployment, which I'll show you the figures in just a moment on that. And it also creates more future tax revenue, which will help future budgets. So again, lower employment means there's more people in the workforce all paying tax, and mostly when people are in the workforce, it doesn't change too much where they willingly just go and leave a job. So it worked in 2020, worked in 2021. So let's have another crack at it. Okay, so just in terms of revenue sources, I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but this just actually just shows where all of the revenue for the government comes from. So as you can see, the biggest chunk of it, I probably should draw it here. No, that's not going to work. If I do that, there we are. Individuals' income tax makes up $225 billion, which is significant. All of the other bits and pieces, they all do contribute, but not as much as individual taxpayers. You've got your company tax, which is over 85 billion. That also includes the mining tax money, and GST makes up a fair chunk of it as well. When I went through it, there hadn't been much that actually really changed on the last year. But what I did notice was superannuation taxes. They've actually they're looking at being nearly double, and I can't quite work out how that's going to happen. So, because I haven't seen any increase in taxes. Certainly no tax proposed on it. But last year it was about $8 billion in superannuation. So I'm thinking. With the way the values have rebounded since COVID of most people's super funds, that there's more more benefits there, and as a result, they're going to pick up a little bit more tax there. The other thing, which I'll just note later, is the rate of superannuation guarantee increases slightly for employees, and so that extra increase will also result in a little bit more tax. But I'm just not quite sure about 15 billion. It just seemed a little bit obscure to me. In total, our revenue there is just under $500 billion that the government brings in. Just in terms of spending, again, I won't go through most of it, but you can see there 35% of it's on social security and welfare. Find that mouse again. Yeah. So a big chunk of it does go to our welfare and social security area, and then our healthcare. We've about 16-17% in there, and defence is at 5.8%, despite all the money that has been thrown there. Again, looking at this over the last year, there hasn't really been any change or any massive obscurity in the way it's allocated. There's about a 2% increase in social security and 2% in health, but it's pretty much all the same. So I just mentioned unemployment before. So currently, so I was meant to change that. It officially came out at 4% the other night on the budget, so my apologies. I started the slides the day before. The forecast when they did the budget last year was for it to be 4.5%. So it's actually improved quite significantly. And as I mentioned before, when we look at where it was at last budget, we're at 5.6%. So that spending that I mentioned about before and those tax incentives to businesses, they've really done their job and seen that jobless rate reduced from 5.6 down to 4.1. So it's actually worked, which has been really good, and that that's a lot of extra Australians in the workforce. And I think the media were pretty keen on discussing that it's pretty much a 50-year low there at 4%. So they've actually done a really good job there. And as you can see, just when the government took place, it was 5.7. So despite COVID and all of those jobs that were lost through the time and people that were stood down, especially those in the hospitality industry and the retail sector, it's been able to bounce back. And I think a lot of us, we've all been to restaurants or something in the last few months where they're really struggling to actually get staff because there's just no one around there. So they're all struggling to actually find staff that actually want to work. The other thing that we've got there with the rate down around 4% is now we're getting to the skinny end of things where people that are looking for jobs, there's not as many of them as a percentage. A lot of them are the people that are wanting to remain unemployed. So it's going to be difficult to see that fall too much further. I just threw this one up here though, because this is a really interesting statistic. So for every extra 250,000 people that they employ, we actually save $3 billion in welfare and pick up $2 billion in tax. So it's a $5 billion turnaround, which is really significant. I tried to do my figures, and I've got there. It's about where they were and where they're at. It's about a $360,000. Sorry, 360,000 people more in the workforce now than what there was last year. So coming back to that, that's extra government revenue that's that we are receiving in tax and saving and paying out in welfare payments. They are forecasting for next year the rate to drop to 3.75. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. The government debt, which I like to talk about, I think it's really important that we look at this. Last year, the interest rate on all of the debt was about 0.88%, and now it's crept up to about 1%. That's obviously reflecting that interest rates are going to be on the rise shortly. So what they're paying on everything that they owe has gone up slightly. Having said that, though, it's still at a significantly low rate, and their loan buying power is a lot better at 1% than what it was a few years ago when they were paying around 4 or 5% for it. So in terms of that, when we look at the debt that they had previously at a lower amount, they were paying a much higher interest rate on it. So paying that extra interest at the time actually has allowed them now to have a much larger amount of debt, but actually they're paying less interest. So it's about $500,000 less interest. It's like $500 million less interest. They're not. There wasn't anything on the prediction of where it's going. But I had a look. If you want to look at the budget paper 1, page 97, that's where it's all at. No, and even the thing is, they use the word around 1%, whereas last year it was very specifically 0.88. So I don't know whether around 1% is 0.99 or 1.05. But there's definitely mention that they expect interest rates to be increasing in the second half of this year, which good for those of you that got term deposits. Not so good for those of you that have got loans or your children that have got loans. And now I'm sorry about the messiness of this slide, but I I love the figures, and I'm trying to work out a way of making it simpler. We've actually got three different debts here, but the first one, the first column, again. There it is. So this column here is our household debt. So this is just to show how our personal debt has increased over the years. So I've gone back to 1990 when it was quite modest at 96 billion. But we're seeing massive increases in the debt levels year on year at the moment. So now we're at 3.16 trillion, which is just an enormous amount of money that we as Australian homeowners, not so much homeowners, credit card owners, afterpay users, lay-by, it's all there. But that's a massive figure. In fact, to look at it another way, that's actually more than the entire retirement savings of our country. So it's that's got alarm bells written all over it. And when we're talking about potential interest rate increases, that's a scary outcome to see what's going to happen, because not everyone's going to be able to afford their loans as that tends to increase. The next two columns, we've got our state and local government debt. So despite the stimulus that each of the states gave to various employers to keep the employees going, or to just keep the businesses afloat, that's actually stayed pretty level, which I actually thought was quite surprising when I saw that. And then the big one is the national debt. Now this is their gross debt, which is a different figure to the one that they refer to in the all of the budget, which is the net debt. So I'll show you a bit more. I'll spend a bit more time on the net debt in a moment, but just again to see how that's blown out a little bit from 883 to 970. The thing is, though, that was forecast to be significantly more this year. So the government has actually saved quite a lot, which is really good. I think the one thing that I've also noticed now is that the government aren't looking so much to pay the debt down to zero. It doesn't look like that's on the agenda. I think what they're more or less looking at now is having a look at how much revenue the country earns and reducing the percentage of revenue. So every year our revenue will tend to increase as businesses turn over more, and we sell more goods either locally or globally. So when you look at the country's revenue, if they can just reduce the percentage, then that's probably more of an indication of a healthy debt level, more so than trying to achieve zero. I know they don't like it up where it is, but the reality is a zero debt, I don't think's really possible. Probably, I was going to say maybe not in my lifetime. We'll see how we go with that. I do want to be frozen and reanimated in 1,000 years' time. But what was lacking, I suppose, a little bit, as I said, I think that the government did balance the budget pretty well this time and didn't overspend. They did spend a bit more than they probably should have, but it could have been a lot worse. But we definitely need restraint going into future years. And I think when we see next year, if it is a coalition government to get in, I think we'll be up for a pretty tight budget next year. So they try to splash a bit of cash around now to hopefully get themselves back in. And then when they've got a few years up their sleeve to where they're not going to lose their power, then they can come and be a bit harsher on us. So what I've done there, this is the net debt, which is the one that's the important figure that that's used throughout the budget. And what I have just done is shown you what the previous year is. So that's the last year. This is what the forecast was going to be for this year, and this is what it's actually now forecast to be. So standing in front of the Zoom screen as it was last year, the debt was forecast to be $719 billion right now. The reality is it's actually 631 billion. So there's actually been an improvement of nearly $90 billion in the level of debt in the last 12 months. And for me, I think it's really disappointing that hasn't been picked up in the media. They've done well in terms of being able to do that despite some of the catastrophes we've had, the fires, the floods. Still coming out of COVID, everyone wanting free RAT tests and all of the PCR tests. All of that has cost a lot of money, and yet we're still 88 billion better off than what they thought we'd be. A lot of that is attributable to the extra money they've received from mostly iron ore. That has been a big benefit. For those of you that have sort of followed the last few years, and those of you that have got self-managed funds that we do the share webinars for, it's been one of the big things that the government used a $55 a tonne forecast for iron ore, and for most of last year it was sitting up over $200. So that's just more tax revenue for every scoop of iron ore that's pulled out of the ground. So overall, though, when you look at that year on year, the forecast difference is quite significantly lower than what we thought it was going to be when we stood here last year. And the other thing was the peak in the debt last year. Sorry for those of you on Zoom, the mouse is annoying me. So 980, but they were expecting the peak to be 2027 or 2028. So they expect that to grow over $1 trillion. Now we're looking at a peak in 2026 of 864 billion. So it's still significant, but it's looking like it'll peak at around that 860 billion mark and then start to fall, which will obviously be a really good thing to see that happen again. So yes, we've still got a couple of years of debt increase before what they actually start to chip away and get that under control. Any thoughts on that? Is it scary or is it not too bad? Yeah, I mean, you may as well put an M there. It doesn't matter. It's million, billion. Like it's easy money. Yeah, yep. Like I remember, I don't know what it was, 5 or 6 years ago. They gave an extra $2 million to the Great Barrier Reef, and like it was such a big thing. And now that this year they've given $2 billion to the Great Barrier Reef. It's just the difference is it's not double, it's not 10 times. It's So what have I got there? I'm just having a look to see whether I've got anything else that's relevant to talk about there. No. Okay. The deficit. So this is what we need to be not red. We need that to be black to start paying off our debt. But what I've done there is I've looked at where we were in 2020. So if we go back to the furthest part of the slide, the rightmost, we expected the debt in 2021 to be 213 billion, and it was actually the deficit, not the debt, and that came in at 161. So there's even an improvement last year, but then if you look back to where the second line, we've ended up with a deficit of 79.8 billion, whereas it was forecast to be 106 last year and 112 the year before. So it's actually, again, I think in every line item there, the deficit situation is actually better than what it was in previous budgets. And the fact that, I know, again, they're just numbers, but if you look at 21, 22, we've gone from 106 billion down to 80. That's 26 billion dollars, which is a significant amount that actually is not going into adding on to our debt. And again, I just don't think the media have given any sort of acknowledgement to that. But again, despite these really rough times, they've managed to keep that somewhat under control. What have I had there? So just even interestingly, I just put a note in for this figure here in the December update, the MyFO, mid-year economic forecast for those that are playing at home. That was forecast to be 99. So it looked really good that it was going to be 7 billion off it. And here we are 6 months later in a much better situation. Sorry. And debt to GDP. GDP is what I basically said before. That's how much we manufacture and sell within the country. Doesn't matter so much. The main thing that we're really looking at here is just the percentage, and we don't want it increasing. We want it decreasing. So think about this as the same as a percentage of your wage going to pay debt. So last year that was forecast at the moment to be 30%. It came in a little bit lower. But as you can see, as a percentage in the next few years, it's going to increase. So that's not really a healthy thing at all. Having said that, though, it is still a better situation than what was forecast last budget. So there's definitely some improvement there. And they're saying after 25-26, as you can see, those 2 years at pretty much a similar figure. They think it's going to plateau out at that point and then start to reduce. I can't remember what it was when I came into power. I have a feeling it was 17%. So I might be incorrect on that. I've got it on my notes, which I unfortunately left at home. It's not nice. We've got to have a lot of things go right to make sure that that industry still ticks along and that all that employment stays low. And tax received from taxpayers is able to still come in as revenue to the government, because if any of these things don't work properly, then we're going to actually see a situation where these figures could actually be quite a lot larger. So there's a few concerns about inflation at the moment, which is a problem. We've got a situation where people are spending a lot, and the cost of goods is going up a little bit, but it has to be curbed. It's really interesting that the petrol price was actually doing the job. Now that, as I'll get to in a moment, but as everyone will no doubt know, the excise being cut, and even the amounts of money that have been just gifted to people via tax offsets or via the $250 handout, which I'll talk again in a moment about. That's going to encourage people to spend more, and pretty much every cent of it will be spent, which will further create an issue with inflation. So what the petrol excise was doing has been undone, and then they fueled it by giving this extra money to the taxpayer, which was probably irresponsible. I think that the $250 I think was worth $6 billion of spending. Sorry, no, it was $3 billion of spending, but that is going to create a bit more of an issue. So that was no doubt an election sweetener, $250. So what's going to happen as a result of that is we'll see interest rates start to go up sooner than what we probably would have liked. So what petrol was doing is now not going to hit the pockets as hard. So the only way they can control inflation is to stop us having as much money, is to start to increase the interest rates. So we'll see that happening sooner than later, which is not really good news for anyone. So the petrol excise, I don't think there's any secrets about this. So 22 cents relief for the next 6 months. There are flow-on effects, which I don't think was covered. So whilst it's good that we're all going to save a little bit of money at the Bowser, it does mean that all of the trucks and transportation of our goods and services, our groceries, that should all start to come down a little bit, at least for the next 6 months with that relief. I bought a broccoli the other day and it's $5.80. I was telling Gerard this the other night, $5.80 for broccoli, and it wasn't like one of these giant pumpkin competition broccolis. It was just a normal broccoli, but I couldn't believe it. It was normally like $2, I would have thought, for a broccoli.
Lettuce, it was almost $5.
$5 for a lettuce. Yeah. So I was trying to work out how many broccoli or how many lettuce can they fit in the truck, and for the extra 22 cents, can it really blow out from $2 to $5 for these items? So look, I don't expect we're going to see tons of savings at at the supermarket, but it should just see, we should just see that normalise a little bit. Just another thing is you might not have noticed too much of a difference at the Bowser at this point, especially those of you that got diesel. So what happens is the excise is paid when the service station buys the fuel. So at the moment, you've got all these service stations around the company that got tanks under that are full of fuel that they've paid excise on, and government are dropping the excise. So lucky this is the guy who was getting his delivery today or yesterday because he had empty tanks. He's not paying excise on it. But the guy that filled up on Tuesday, he's got excise on the whole tank, and they haven't discussed any way of how they're going to rationalise that. So you're going to find some of the places are going to take a while to actually be able to filter that through.
Spend more money than you have to.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah, you'll go to BP or whatever, and they'll have an extra 10 cents, but because you don't want to do a U-turn to go to Shell or something. Yeah.
A lot of drop tonight on the way here.
So a lot dropped tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I saw a lot were around sort of $1.85 or $1.89, but I think that's more a reflection on the oil price dropping more so than the excise. But once you see that the diesel drop, then you know that's when the excise is properly informed. So anyway, that will give us a little bit of relief. When I travelled up to Queensland not so long ago, it was $1.99 at that point in time before the Ukraine stuff happened. So we're seeing $2 odd for a litre here post oil issues. But I just want to come back to, it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. Some of the service stations might not be competitive, or, like if they go and empty half of their tank and then top it up, that means they can only pass on half of the saving until they effectively clear out the fuel that they've paid the excise on. So I think that's all I'll talk about there. Okay, so tax cuts, and it's cuts, not really. It's not huge. So the big incentive for everyone there is $420 of the low and middle income tax offset. So that's been extended for another year, and as Paul would say, that's been $1,080, which the government have been really kind and generous to allow us for the last couple of years. It wasn't expected to go as long as it has, but they have been able to keep it up. So what they've done is they've actually increased it from $1,080 to $1,500. So that's this extra $420. And I have simplified things there because, as you can see on the table there, so those that are earning less than $37,000, the tax offset was $255. So that's increased to $675. And for those that are earning over $48,000, that's the full $1,500, and then it reduces at $126,000. It cuts out. Really interesting. I've done the maths, and I'll show you a slide in a second. I don't know when it's coming up, but I thought, they haven't actually changed the reduction rate from 3 cents as it was last year, but I'll come back to that in a moment. Now that doesn't replace the other low income tax offset either. So we're in a pretty good situation in terms of before we have to pay tax. So for people that aren't pension age, we're able to earn just over $25,000 now without paying a cent of tax, which is pretty good considering our tax-free threshold is $18,000. So these offsets are allowing someone to effectively earn $7,000 more income than what they ordinarily would have. So that's pretty good for those lower income earners. Just in terms of strategies, for those that have got trusts or even just personal investments, it will allow for a large tax-free distribution, which is pretty handy. And as I mentioned, it will also result in larger tax refunds. And the tax rates, they have actually remained the same, so there's no difference. But this is just highlighting the changes that came into effect last year. So for this year and next year, these are the rates that we're currently paying, so no change, as I mentioned. It was really good to see the That was, what was it, 37,000, I think, has increased to 45,000. And the 120 was initially 70,000, increased to 80,000. Sorry, it might have been 80, went to 90, and then up to 120,000. So again, that's putting extra money in everyone's pockets, which is really good. So most people at some level, if they're earning income, are actually starting to, getting a benefit. And there was a lot of uproar last year with the Labor accusing the coalition of putting extra money in higher income earners' pockets. But I'm looking at this and seeing that it's actually been spread pretty well, or as well as they could possibly do it without sort of leaving everyone out. Now, from 24-25, and this is legislated, all of the taxes going to change significantly. And the main benefit there is, as you can see, is here we are in between 45,000, that then goes to 200,000, where everyone will just be paying 30% in that area. And that covers 94% of our tax-paying population. So most Australians won't pay any more than 30% tax, which is a really big deal. And that's costing a lot in terms of that revenue that we're seeing, that's contributing to that deficit. But that, putting more money in people's pockets will again put more spending out there, which means that businesses will employ more staff, which will pay tax, and they'll buy more equipment, which will then create jobs for other businesses, etc. That's a good little circle. The 37% tax bracket disappears, and those are lucky enough to earn $200,000 or more. They're not going to have any difference in their tax rate. It's not a very exciting chart, but that's basically how that tax savings is going to occur to people on various incomes this year. Next financial year. And as you can see, after you get to $90,000, that rebate is going to start to reduce. I had a feeling I did some other work on that chart. I have to come back to that. Okay, so strategies. I say this every year. Don't just spend everything that the government give you. Do something with it. Put something aside. Save half, spend half, but invest it. Pay it off your loan. And I've been saying this for a couple of years. Whilst interest rates are low, we should be putting as much as we possibly can into the loans and get used to paying a higher amount and actually paying more principal off now. Because as interest rates go up, that money that you've not been putting towards a loan and been using quite comfortably to live on, that's going to then be affected, and you're going to have to adjust. You're going to be forced to put more money to the loan. So I reckon you should do it now. Reduce your repayments, knock years off your mortgage. Super contributions, I think, is really important, especially those that are eligible for the co-contribution, which I'll show you in a moment, and just invest it. So what I've done here is I've looked at how the co-contribution will work with the full rebate. So this is the 420 plus what we were already entitled to, being the 1,080. And so how much money how much extra money you'd have in your pocket, and what the benefit is if you were to put this as a personal contribution into your super. So someone earning $37,000, they'll get a $420 tax saving. So if they put that $420 into their super as a personal non-concessional or no deduction contribution, the government's going to match that with 50%. So they'll throw in $210. It's a 50% return, guaranteed, no risk. You can't get that anywhere. And that's why I think this is such a great incentive. Okay, 210, that's not that exciting. Okay, so over 10 years, that's $2,000, but it's another $42,000 if you've, $4,200 that you've put into the super fund along the way. Now that all means a more comfortable retirement, or something else you can spend later down the track. And as you can see, when we get up to sort of $50,000, it starts to shade out, but $45,000, not too bad there. We can get about $802 of that in. and still get a $400 co-contribution. And what's our figure this year? Our shade-off threshold is 57,000, where you won't get anything. But yeah, as long as you're earning under 42,000, you can actually get the full contribution, which but you'd have to put a full $1,000 in to get the maximum. So I probably made it a bit more confusing, but I won't spend too much more time on it. Salary sacrificing. So for those that don't want to salary sacrifice or can't, so don't want to use the co-contribution or can't use it, just showing you the benefit of actually using this money towards salary sacrifice. So again, just have a look at the income ranges and see where you fit in. And what you'll see in the first column is that tax saving that you'll get this year. And then if you were to salary, the next column is how much you can salary sacrifice to basically consume that whole tax saving. So for someone on 40,000, if they salary sacrifice $800, that'll use that $645 net of tax. But what it does do is it puts $693 net into the super. Now, those of you that got self-managed super funds, that would probably end up being closer to the $800 because of the way we do things. Those of you with the retail funds, you're probably going to cop that 15% contributions tax straight away. But you can see as the incomes are in this range here, especially this $48,000, $90,000 area. Our $1,500 allows us to put $2,290 in, which actually gives us $1,946 of net contribution. So it's a big benefit. We're getting a $1,500 tax credit, but to offset it, we're actually putting nearly $2,000 extra into our super fund, which is well worthwhile. So if you're not used to having it now, don't get used to having it, and do something like this to just help give it a bit of a boost. Okay, superannuation. So really good news. No tinkering with the superannuation system. I know it's a bugbear for everyone, is that every year we almost have something happen where super's tinkered with. We're very lucky. They haven't done anything. It looks like they're getting the message. For those of you that watched my webinar on Friday, it was probably my key thing is we want to see the tinkering stop, because that doesn't build confidence with the Australians, and people want to know that if they're going to start putting some money away, especially in their early 50s or something like that, that by the time they retire, the system's not going to be too much different than where it is now, and that does discourage a lot of personal saving. So yeah, pretty much good news there. Nothing there. But what we have seen is that 50% minimum reduction has been extended yet again. So this is a ripper for those of us that are, well, not me, I don't have a pension yet, but those of you that have got an income stream in your super fund, means we don't have to take out that full rate for another year. And I know some people will go, that's crazy, how come someone wouldn't need money? But we do have clients that are in a circumstance where they don't need to take their full allocation and end up just having too much cash build up. This allows us for another year to not have to take that extra money out, which is a big relief. And as you can see there, it's just the thresholds are just halved for each of the different age brackets that you may fall into. I'm really surprised that they did this. I don't see the reason why they did it. I think the only reason is maybe just to keep some higher income earners happy for the election, but I don't even know whether they would have thought that one through. I just don't see any benefit in it. The value of most people's super funds have recovered since the COVID crisis hit, no one's been forced to take money out of their pensions at a distressed level when the market's low. So we'll take it. Well, absolutely, we'll take it, but I don't think it was actually a necessary measure. I'm not sharing this with the government, this video, by the way. So those that want it, get a private link. I learned my lesson a few years ago when I ripped one of their budgets apart, and then the day after my presentation, they filled all the holes of it. So this is how we're going to overcome all of this. So super guarantee. So this is how much employers have to pay their staff. That's increasing from 10 to 10.5%. That's not, actually, I don't think it's even a coalition measure. It was a Labor initiative back when they were last in power. But just to let everyone know that that is increasing. So good news for employees. It means there's extra money going in. This is progressively going up to 12%. So more money going into your super, which will help your future retirement balance. For an employer, it's a forced pay rise for employees. Okay, other super thresholds. There's not been any change to the main ones. I thought this was relevant to put up though, because a lot of people do ask, is that 25,000 changed or whatever, which is now 27,500. Yeah, so there's no changes to anything there. So the deductible contribution limit's 27,500, which is what it is this current financial year, and it'll be that next financial year and probably the year after, I think. The non-concessional cap, which is your personal contributions, that remains at 110,000. We can use the bring forward provision where we're able to bring forward the next 2 years and use it now. So it's 330,000, which is 3 times 110,000. And for those that are in the pension phase, our transfer balance cap is 1.7 million at the moment. Now, those of you that we use it for 1.6 million doesn't mean we get to use another 100,000. It means once you use your 100% allocation, which when it was 1.6, we used 100%. That means you've now used 100% for the rest of your life. So there's no relief there. But for someone that's starting the pension effectively now, their cap is 1.7 million. And that'll go up in $100,000 lots every few years. Centrelink. I just wanted to talk about the current eligibility for people for age pension. I think that's important. So at the moment, you now have to be 66.5, and there's your dates of birth that you have to be to qualify for that. But basically, if you are in that area now, you have to be 66.5. And this isn't a budget measure, but it's just a reminder. So from July next year, we actually reached the cap that was introduced quite a number of years ago at the age of 67. So pretty much anyone born after January next year has to be 67. So January, it works out to January next year, have to be 67. Yep. Right. Centrelink age pension. I just wanted to note this, that normally we don't see March increases. So that was actually, it's normally 19th of September, they do the increase. Actually brought forward the increase to March. So everyone that's on an age pension or full age pension, you can see there's been an increase there. So that's actually helping just put a little bit of extra money in age pensioners' pockets. No, it's never enough. I don't set the rate, unfortunately, but it is nice to see that was brought forward, especially at a time where some people are actually struggling a little bit more than normal. So the $250 cost of living payment, or the budget sweetener, so the election sweetener. So they were, I think, a little misleading. They did say self-funded retirees were entitled to it, but you also have to be a self-funded retiree that's got a Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. So that's the one where your income has to be under $80,000 in order to receive it. So, other than that, you pretty much have to be on a Centrelink payment of some sort in order to qualify for the $250 cost of living payment. However, the majority of people that are on some sort of Centrelink benefit wouldn't be eligible for that extra $420. worth of benefit that I showed before in the tax. So everyone's getting a little bit of a taste of some extra payments there. The immediate asset write-off that has not been extended. So this is a tax incentive for employers to go and buy their equipment, cars, trucks, computers, widgets, whatever they want. So that's still allowed up until the end of next year, and that is going to see a run of cars, I would imagine, coming up to June next year. So whilst it's hard to get a car at the moment, I believe, it means, it means order now, yeah. Because if that goes back to where, yeah, all those people that have got business caravans, or business boats, if there's any electricians watching through. But yeah, so it's very tough to get hold of the car at the moment. I understand, you know, for some people it's about 6 months wait for a new car to make it over here. So just be mindful of that. But then I would imagine that instant asset write-off will probably drop back to where it was previously, which was 20,000, or even before that 10,000. There was 5,000 before that, or 1,000 before that too. Yeah, going right back. So I think it'd be madness almost to do that, because this is the measure that has reduced that unemployment down to where we are at the moment. So it's put the money directly back into employing people and help the tax revenue come through. So it's probably watch this space, but I have to say the fact that it wasn't mentioned in the budget, it means that they're probably going to move with that. And there's my picture of that circle that I keep talking about. Reduce the tax by the employer or the business owner, he gets more money, he can employ more people, he can buy more widget machines. The machine needs maintenance, which puts other people in a job. It means it has to be delivered, which means the delivery company might need more trucks, which then they need more drivers, and then you know, you might have more workers that have to work on the machine as a result. So it just keeps everything ticking along, you know, really nicely. That slide that I mentioned is definitely not there, so I'm not sure what's happened. I did definitely updated it. Similar thoughts to last year, you know, this billions versus millions. I really hate that it's just so easy for them to roll off billion off the top of their tongue, you know. And then, you know, like 1.3 billion, well, make it 1.1, yeah. It saves $200 million, like it's a significant amount of money if they do that. Like they're spending on cybersecurity 9.9 billion. So they actually realised that they didn't say 10, so they saved 100,000 off that, but they should have just made it 10. The discipline has been missing, and as I said, you know, they were probably, if they were disciplined the way they needed to be, the Labor government would have just walked all over them, and you know, the election would really be you know, missing a bit of firepower. So they've done what they needed to give themselves a fighting chance without overdoing it too much. I don't think the Labor government would be able to do anything better. They could probably deploy some money elsewhere or to their marginal seats as well, with different projects. But overall, you know, the scale or the breadth of the country is being covered off pretty well there. So expect a tighter budget next year, especially if the coalition get in. I'm not sure whether the Labor government would keep it tight. I think they'd want to come in and really try to thank people for voting them in. So I'd imagine we'd probably see them have a bit of a spend there, but certainly a coalition budget, I think, would be a lot tighter. So my apologies, that slide, I definitely did it, and that was earlier and updated. I'm not sure why it hasn't saved, but I'll have to fix that at some point. Just as on finishing this, what? Feels like I've got the wrong the wrong budget up, the wrong presentation there. There's a slide here, it's not meant to be there. I just always like to show this, your local businesses, the businesses where your kids or where you went and asked them for donations for their netball club, their footy club or whatever. They need this now, especially the smaller cafes and restaurants. But just look after them. And these are all things that can be just free. Share their Facebook posts or whatever. Doesn't take much. Leave them a nice positive review, that does go a long way. This is what's thrown me. I didn't have that in there. Just as I'm finishing, I've heard this so much in our business in the last 6 months. I wish, from clients, I wish we had have seen you sooner. I wish we had have come to you first. Just on that, I just sort of encourage people. We're in a situation now where, some people have had some pretty bad advice over the last few years leading up to the Royal Commission. I'd like, my wish is for them to come to us first and actually get the right advice. So just be mindful of that. And if you know of anyone that maybe was using a planner at a bank which no longer provides advice or something like that, you know what we're like. So it'd be appreciated if you could put them on to us. That would be really good. Okay, any questions? So I'll just check the Q&A here. That's for you on Zoom. You're able to ask questions if you wish. I know, just while you're thinking of that, one of the questions I think a lot of people have had on their mind is just, what the future of Diversified, what we're doing, where we've been heading. And, I think I've been pretty honest with everyone. We've had a pretty tough few years in the wake of the Royal Commission, but we didn't put our head between our legs like everyone else. We're still here, which is the main thing, and it's fantastic. We're getting some light at the end of the tunnel, which is even better. We've got a good business, we've got great staff, fantastic clients. So that's about as much as I think any business owner could want. So there's a lot of opportunities. As I mentioned, with the banks leaving the industry, that's left a lot of people in the country without advice. And at least they were getting some advice at the bank. Not all of it was good, but some of it was. And there were some good planners at the banks, which are, a lot of them are no longer in the industry. So we've seen the number of planners reduce and clients need a home. So I think, for us, we're in a pretty lucky situation that we're going to be eventually some sort of a beneficiary there. I will say eventually. In terms of us, we've got, we've been lucky. We've put a few extra planners on. So good, people that share our morals and ethics, good quality, high quality planners. So really wrapped about that as well. And in terms of Diversified, we've got our main office here in Frankston. We've got Currumborough, Cooyrup, Scoresby. I think that's all of them. Currumborough, Cooyrup, Scoresby, Frankston, and Zoom, I should say, because that's an important part of our business now. So we're spread out. We've got a good reputation, and our brand's strong, which is really good. So we just want to continue to grow and keep stamping our dominance on the industry. So that answers the question I know a lot of people have had. I've got no questions coming up through the Zoom. Now I don't know whether that's because it's my IT issue or not, but I'll just leave it at that. Anyone else in here got any questions about anything? No?
Got one for you.
Okay.
Not so much a question on that, but just on pensioners. We're hearing a lot now and using New Zealand as the model, because everything good seems to come out of New Zealand, nothing else comes out of anywhere else. But over there with pensioners, you get your pension, or everyone on the web gets a pension out there when they reach a retiring age.
I don't know.
Is my understanding. But once they're on the pension, they can still go out and earn as much as they much as they can and just pay normal taxation.
Okay.
Rather than here, where you're on a
Yeah.
pension, you can earn a certain amount to before your pension starts to drop off.
Okay.
I would see that as being especially at the moment, where the shortages of labour and what have you, benefit with those who would want to go out and say, well, I'm not going to go out now because it will just affect my pension. We say, well,
Okay, I'll try to summarise that so the Zoom people can hear it. So the question was, okay, the Q&A is working. Yeah, thank you, Greg. So the question that was just asked was something I don't know the answer to. New Zealand apparently allow all of their residents to receive an age pension when they retire, and they can continue working and still receive that age pension upon retirement.
so they pay tax on what they earn, of course.
And they pay tax on it,
Yeah.
yes. So look, I don't know the answer. I know we've got only a couple of clients here that we look after that have a New Zealand pension, and that offsets the Australian pension dollar for dollar. But in terms of what happens in New Zealand, I don't know. I thought there would be a measure that would encourage older Australians to come back to work and maybe have a larger income allowance than what they currently do. There's my Centrelink expert in here. I think a single is allowed to earn $256, $180 plus $500 a fortnight if they work. 300 for a single, yeah. So 180 plus 300, so it's 480. So 420. 320. I need my Centrelink book. Anyway, there's already an incentive in Australia to be able to work. It's not much, but there is this what's called a work bonus. I thought it was 500 for a couple, plus their normal Centrelink free amount. So, but it is somewhat limited. But I think you can earn around about $65,000 as a couple before losing the age pension under the income test. Yeah. So you progressively lose it. So you're losing it at 50 cents in the dollar as it goes up.
How many hours a week?
Depends on what your wage was. If you earn 65,000 an hour, then it's one.
I don't have any plans on doing either.
Yep. No, I think it's a really important point that's been made, and I think it's something that the government's missed that opportunity with here, is that we've got a low unemployment rate. We talked about the restaurants can't get people to help serve tables or whatever. There's a lot of age pensioners that would like a little bit of extra money. And it might sound funny, but what's to say that someone that's on an age pension can't take a meal to someone at a restaurant? So I think it would have been a real good opportunity to allow someone to just earn a little bit more. Yeah, and maybe not the whole income tax free, but maybe just extend that work bonus at the moment. It's tough also because of the lack of the international students that we've got here. So for those of you that know Maz, who used to work for me, he also on weekends worked at Marvel Stadium. They couldn't get anyone to work at Marvel Stadium, so they were putting out like a $500 bonus for him to find someone. He'd get 500, and the new worker would get 500. That's how desperate for workers over there. So sorry, Maz, if I know you're watching, buddy. So just told everyone what your secret incentive was. I've got a question here. Okay, Russell, we spoke about this on Friday on my other webinar, mate. The MyGov ID for self-managed super fund trustees. What's this? Okay, I won't spend too much time on it because you've already had 4 hours of my time today. But the MyGov ID, so what they're doing there is it's a director's ID. So everyone with a self-managed super fund that we look after, they all have corporate trustees. Everyone's got a company will need to do this MyGov ID, which is different to MyGov by the 1st of November. And so we're going to just get on to doing that on paper. Big issue we raised on Friday again in the webinar was that so many people struggle with MyGov, full stop. Raising your hands in the room. Who struggled? I saw 2 people's hands not go up, so that means that 99% of people struggle with MyGov. So rather than go through MyGov and then set up yet another one called MyGov OD, which is different, and then go through the process of registering yourself as a director, we'll just do it on paper for you, and that'll fix it all up. Now, interestingly, the government won't allow us to actually help. So you can't sit with a financial planner or accountant or a lawyer and go through and set it up. You have to do it yourself. And I think the rationale behind that is they don't want us having access to your private information, which is on MyGov. It's obviously meant to be personal and secure for that reason. But that's going to just then be a single source that they've got a identifier for all of the companies that you are a director of. And the aim there is just to stop this Phoenix company type behaviour where you would have heard where someone goes bust and then opens up another company the next day. As incredible as it sounds, the tax office at the moment don't have a single identifier to say Dean Hutchins is the director of all of these companies. Now my database, I could search and find that out pretty easily. So this is their measure to do that. So hopefully that helps you, Russ. But we'll sort all that out for you by the time it needs to be done. Do we have any other questions in here? No more questions here on the Zoom. So we're going to finish it up. Hopefully everyone's been able to have a glass of wine. One's been sitting here the whole time. I haven't been able to have any. Warming up, it's maturing. It's aged another half hour. Okay, so I'll wrap it up then. Thank you, everyone. And as I said before, I think this is all recorded now, and I'll be able to send out a link to the client so that it's up there and able to be viewed if you need to look at it again. Obviously, for those that are clients, any measure that doesn't have a direct flow-on effect to you, we'll make sure that we maximise that for you so that you're getting the best benefit from it that we possibly can.